Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. I have a very exciting announcement to make today. I have just published my second book. This is the first one written solely by me. The last one I co-authored with Johannes Künzle. That was the Herbs and Weeds of Father Johannes Künzle. This one, I'm really excited about. This starts a new series of books that I'm going to be doing, and they're really focused on my region of the American Southeast. This book is about the trees that grow in the American Southeast that can be used herbally, that can be used for herbal medicine. Nothing like this has ever been written before. It's absolutely unique and one of its kind. It's based on personal experience and exhaustive research over several months. And I think y'all are just going to really enjoy it. I've gotten good feedback on it from the few people I've shared it with so far. I think it's going to be indispensable. It's really going to be applicable to not only people who live in my region, but in North Carolina alone, we have more than 400 native or introduced species of trees. That's not including bushes. That's not including shrubs or woody vines or anything like that. We have just this incredible diversity in the state of North Carolina. Really, natural diversity is what we're known for. We have the Great Dismal Swamp down on the coast up toward the Virginia line. We have a coastline that is subtropical, much like the Gulf, really just not quite as hot. Just a few, like two hardiness zones off, really. A lot of tropical plants there. You'll see a lot of unique trees growing down there. And in the middle of the state, well, you can kind of break it into, we have the dense pine forests. We actually have pine barrens. The Fayetteville area, the Southern Pines area, anything that has pine in its name, these were areas that were almost uninhabitable for, a couple of centuries because nothing grew here but pines and wild grapes and a few scrub oaks. But it really interesting hollies and all kinds of stuff in this area. The next area over, you're getting into the Uwharrie National Forest. The Uwharries may be the oldest mountain range in the world. It's a real hidden treasure in North Carolina. Very few people even know what the Uwharries are, much less how to pronounce them. They're in the region just immediately west of the Sandhills, basically running from old, say, Troy or Biscoe, North Carolina, Star, which is the center of the state, all the way over to Albemarle. Maybe even a little further. You can take it almost as far as Locust, which is right outside of Charlotte. From that point west and up before you hit the mountains, it's dense hardwood forests. This is where the center of our furniture industry was, going from like Albemarle all the way up into Hickory and up that way. You got all kinds of oaks and maples and hickories and just all the incredible hardwoods that the furniture industry was based on. And then you get into the mountains and you're in a completely different area. You go from the foothills to mountains as high as, Mount Mitchell, you're talking what, around 6,000 some feet. We really have just incredible diversity. And plants grow here that really don't grow anywhere else. I told you before how we get the Asian herbs that most people think only grow in China, and they grow right here in the mountains of North Carolina. We also have like the Venus flytrap down in the Great Dismal Swamp. Again, that only grows there. With this incredible diversity, the trees that grow in my home state of North Carolina probably grow where you live. I mean, these trees are the same trees Jolanta and I were writing about that grow in the Alps of Austria, and Germany, and France and Switzerland and all that, and Italy. Same trees with a few exceptions. Like we have pines, they have stone pines. I wish we had stone pines, but we have loblollies and longleafs and, et cetera, et cetera. But they have, just like we do, birches and beeches and maples and oaks, et cetera, willows. These trees grow up into Canada. Most of them grow down into Florida, west of the Mississippi. This is my region I'm talking about, basically from Virginia down to South Georgia. I can't really address a lot of the unique species to Florida or, say, the Gulf Coast and some of the trees that just grow out west. I'm not touching those. I'm touching this region, but my region basically overlaps with anywhere in the temperate zones of the Northern Hemisphere. And a whole lot of these plants grow in the Southern Hemisphere. I don't know, anything about the plants that grow in the Amazon jungle. That's not my region. I can't talk about that. I can tell you what grows in my region. And so whether you live in the South or, elsewhere, take a look at the table of contents. I'm going to post that. You're probably going to see a whole lot of trees. So, it may say trees of the American Southeast, Mid-Atlantic region. A lot of these trees are going to be in your area, and whether you live here or not, you're probably going to want to get a copy of this because this is the only book that I know of about the medicinal uses for trees. Now think about how amazing that is. We've talked before about the medicinal value of trees, but let me just read you a little bit from my introduction, and I'll just kind of drive this point home. Okay. Something that has long interested me is how many people can't see the forest for the trees, or in the case of herbalists, can't see the trees for the herbs. The old saying, of course, refers to such people who get so caught up in details and definitions they can't see the larger picture. Such is certainly the case for many herbalists who overlook the medicinal value of trees. Well, why is this? Well, it likely stems from the multiple meaning of the word herb. An herb may refer to any tender green plant of the herbaceous layer. That's low-growing wildflowers and weeds. The annuals and biannuals, which include not only many of our medicinal plants, but also our garden vegetables and wild foods. An herb may also refer to any plant used to season or flavor food. To herbalists, though, the word herb generally means any plant useful medicinally. Simply put, if a plant can help make one healthy or even, shall we be so bold as to say, treat or cure any sickness or disease or complaint, it's an herb. Of course, we cannot legally say that any plant can be used to treat or cure any disease or illness, etc. This is the law. No matter how stupid and misguided that law is, it's still the law. If we disobey it, people with guns and regulators with fines will show up and show us exactly what it means to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But back to the trees. It's a bit odd that we mainly think of weeds and wildflowers when we consider the subject of herbs. Many trees are not only as potent medicinally as a plant from the herbaceous layer, but much more so. If we consider the yarphas, that's what the late herbalist Michael Moore called so many astringent herbs of the rose family. We talked about that on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Those are the herbs that herbalists generally turn to when you need an astringent, when you're bleeding, when you have a sore throat, when you have sunburn or some swollen tissue, you turn to what they call a yarpha. But is that really the best place to find your astringent? I mean, think about it. Truly few green plants have as much tannic astringency as the bark of several trees. In the modern world, would you really be better served driving out into a meadow and looking for potentilla, or going to your backyard, city park, or sidewalk and scraping off some oak bark? Think about it. Well, if you have severe diarrhea and you're weak and can't get far from the bathroom, I really think oak, dogwood, pine, etc. may be more convenient. Call me crazy, but in such a situation, I don't want to take a hike. Think about it now. This is certainly true for bleeding and sore throat, congestion, spasmodic coughs, and so many other things for which trees are useful. Do you really want to go down to the health food store and try to buy some herbs? Do you want to order some herbs? Do you want to go foraging when you could just walk out in the backyard and pick some pine needles or scrape off some oak bark? In this book, I'll offer the medicinal value of most of the trees that grow in the eastern continental U.S. That's east of the Mississippi River. Simply stated, most trees that grow north of the equator and below the Arctic grow almost everywhere in that region. Here we have mountains similar to upstate New York and coastal regions that are at the very least similar to northern Florida. We have hardwood forests, swamps, sand hills. Botanists a few generations ago found North Carolina to be a paradise of diversity. But I will not limit my exposition to my home state. My goal will be to present the trees growing east of the Mississippi. If your idea of medicinal herbs is little green plants, you're certainly going to find some surprises here. Trees can be strong medicine. I hope to change the way that you view the world around you. I grew up in the mountain forests and the coastal swamps, and I've always been fascinated by trees. I practice herbal medicine for more than 25 years, but have spent my life among the trees. My formal education includes not only credentials as a master herbalist, but certifications in forestry as well. As such, I can offer a very practical presentation to the use of medicinal trees. Medicinal trees have a very long use, and I think it's far more important to present them in the context of history. For me, it's just more convincing if someone can show me that an herb has been used traditionally for a specific purpose. To put it another way, I trust the collective wisdom of 100 or 1,000 generations of human history more than I do the opinion of an individual or a new discovery. As the Bible states, there's nothing new under the sun. The discoveries of herbalists from time immemorial have been handed down from herbalist to herbalist, tested by each generation. New uses for herbs as they were discovered are added to the vast knowledge and various traditions and tested by those who follow. So, where possible in this book, I've chosen to keep my mouth shut and quote the great herbalists from varying traditions: Greek, Roman, monastic medicine, German folk medicine, British, Native American, eclectic, the herbal revivalists of the 1960s and 80s, organic gardeners, field guides, botanists, scientists, and doctors. I don't like to make a whole lot of noise in the woods anyway. So, as I say here in the book, let's take a hike and go look at the trees. Now, hopefully, you're getting a little curious. But you may be thinking, what are these trees? Okay. I discuss abies, that's the firs, maples, buckeye. Tree of heaven is an interesting one that we see at a lot of roadsides. It's got some really good uses. Mimosa, I talked at length in a video lesson last week on mimosa. Very useful tree. Alder, serviceberry, Aurelia spinosa, devil's walking stick. That's a great herb. And yeah, it really does grow around here. And that's an adaptogen, a lot like ginseng. So that's definitely one to keep an eye out for. And you're not going to mistake it for anything else because it's got a lot of spines on it. You don't want to back into that one. Pawpaws, that's one of our native fruits that I discussed last week in the foraging show. Bush groundsel, birch, paper mulberry, hornbeam, hickory, chestnut, catalpa, hackberry, redbud, Atlantic white cedar, fringe tree, or old man's beard. That's another one that's going to really surprise you. Yellowwood, cornus, dogwood, hawthorn, Cunninghamia lanceolata. That's one you're probably not familiar with, but you'll want to look for it after reading this book. I guarantee it. Common persimmon, wahoo or burning bush. That one has a really interesting history. The beech trees, figs. Now that's fig, the fruit. Again, a lot of interesting uses and a really interesting history going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. Ash, rhamnus, honey locust, Kentucky coffee tree. That's one that has an interesting history in early America. Silver bell, witch hazel, rose of Sharon. Rose of Sharon, I was kind of on the I was kind of on the borderline of including it or not because I think of it as more of a bush, but it actually is technically a tree, and it's in the mallow family. You can use rose of Sharon the same way you would use marshmallow. Very important herb you're going to see in a lot of landscaping, A lot of old houses will have a few of these growing in the yard. Pretty plant to include in your landscape and very, very useful. Japanese rain tree, holly, the holly trees and bushes, walnut, juniper, mountain laurel, golden rain tree. And I'm giving you the common names now, but I have everything under the Latin names too, so don't worry about common names and confusion. Crepe myrtle, privet, sweet gum, tulip poplar. And a tulip poplar is also a very interesting tree with a lot of, well, really important uses against viruses and such. A sage orange, magnolia, apple, chinaberry, wax myrtle, mulberry, tupelo, ironwood, sourwood, the princess tree, which is a really unique history. I'll just tell you right now, the princess tree. Next time you see an old railroad track, look beside it, and you'll probably see what we call a princess tree. The reason being, the seeds were soft and fuzzy, and that's what people used to pack things in before styrofoam. So those seeds fell off the trains during shipping and introduced the princess tree to North America. It's actually a native of Asia, and it has some really good medicinal uses. Pretty tree too. Bay laurel, spruce, pine, American sycamore or buttonwood, Chinese pistachio, that's one of our introduced ones, of course. Cottonwood or aspen, this poplar. The whole prunus family. I'm talking plums, cherry, peaches, apricots, nectarines, almonds, damsons, etc. Hop tree, pear, oak, rhododendron. We'll just go ahead and warn you about rhododendron. It's poisonous. Don't use it. It does have some interesting history of medicinal use, and I include that with the warning. It's poisonous. Don't use it. Sumac, and there we're talking like staghorn sumac or smooth sumac. We're not talking, poison sumac, obviously. Locust, this would be black locust, is different from the honey locust. Sable or palmetto. The willow trees, elder, sassafras, one of our wonderful native plants that was actually the very first American export to Europe. They were crazy about sassafras. They thought it was a cure for certain venereal diseases, and it does have just incredible medicinal use. It's also a nice flavoring, and you can make root beer from it and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's a really interesting history. But before tobacco or cotton or even indigo, sassafras was our major export. It was right up there with fur, sassafras and fur trading. Sorbus, that's Sorbus americana, that's American mountain ash or American rowan. That's more of a mountain tree. Bladdernut, Stewardia, styrax, sweetleaf, tamarisk, taxodium. Tilia, which is basswood or lime, that's what they call it in Europe. Wonderful sedative properties. You could be interested in that. Hemlock, elm, Vicennum viburnum, which includes cramp bark, which decreases muscle spasms and all kinds of cramps, not just muscle cramps, but like menstrual cramps. And it's a really good one to have on hand. Tongue tree, Hercules club, xanthoxylum, another interesting one. We get into the properties of wood ash and charcoal, and I make very clear the distinction between American mistletoe and European mistletoe. Hint. European mistletoe, important, powerful, good herb. American mistletoe, poisonous. It will kill you. Okay, you need to know this kind of stuff. But you can see that's tons of trees. And those are just like the main categories. I mean, within each of them, you've got all the related trees. So this book is called Look Up, The Medicinal Trees of the American South, Mid-Atlantic Region, An Herbalist Guide by Judson Carroll. It's going to be, I'll put a link here in the show notes. You can order it. You can go to my blog, southern-appalachian-herbs.blogspot.com. I'll have a little write-up on it. You can order it directly from me, and I hope you will, because if you do, the money comes to me. It's also been published through Smashwords, and it's being offered on Amazon.com, which was not really something I wanted to do, but basically when you get into self-publishing ebooks, you don't have a choice. So if you order it off Amazon, I'm not going to make very much money, but if it's more convenient for you, I'd rather you have the book than not, and I hope you will, if that's how you like to get your books. Otherwise, Smashwords has put it out in everything from Barnes and Noble to Apple Books to you name it. So I mean, I think this is just really great. I mean, it's great for first aid. I mean, we've talked before about how if you're bleeding, like this happened to me, I split my leg open, could not get the bleeding to stop. I had nothing like cayenne pepper, which you can put on there. There was none in the cabinet. By the way, cayenne pepper is a very good styptic. It'll stop bleeding. I didn't have any shepherd's purse, which would have been my next go-to. I limped outside and got some pine pitch, put it on there, put a bandage over it. The bleeding stopped almost instantly. I just propped my leg up for a few minutes. It had been bleeding for over 24 hours, literally. I'd get it stopped, and every time I'd stand up, it would start again. So I put this pine pitch on there. It stopped the bleeding. It helped disinfect and heal the wound, and I don't even have a scar. So that's how important pine pitch can be. If you have a sore throat, that tissue can get boggy. You can actually die. A tea made from pine needles or pine pitch, astringent and antiseptic. It's got the same antiseptic qualities as like pine sol, so it kills the germs. That'll take care of that sore throat. Good for a cough. It's wonderful expectorant. Helps break up the congestion, get the mucus out of the lungs. The pine pollen itself has been shown to increase testosterone in men, well, and women too. Anybody who eats pine pollen. The pine pollen bud, the little male cone, the fumes from it inhaled can actually help with an asthma attack. That's just pine, and that's like 10% of what it can do. All right, so probably everybody knows about willow, right? Willow is the original source of salicin, which was synthesized into aspirin. Willow has a lot of other good uses too, but that's a really good first aid. Not only that, it's easier on your stomach than taking aspirin. And I quote from some really, really interesting sources in this book. I've got Native American herbalists. I've got St. Hildegard von Bingen, Father Nape, Father Künzle, Brother Aloysius is the whole German folk medicine tradition. I've got the British herbalists, Gerard and Culpeper and Miss Greaves. I've got the Thomsonians, everything down to new sources like Botany in a Day, Physician's Desk Reference for Herbal Medicine, Plants for a Future. I really spent a lot of time researching this book. Here's an interesting Buckeye. This is Aeschylus. This is also called horse chestnut. Not really indicated for internal use, but this is primary treatment for varicose veins and hemorrhoids, basically boggy tissues. It helps tonify them. A lot of people suffer from varicose veins. A lot of people look at buckeyes as an absolute nuisance, like a weed. Here's a use for buckeye. I mentioned Tree of Heaven a few minutes ago. This is such an interesting one. This is Allianthus, is the Latin name. It's antispasmodic, cardiac depressant, and an astringent. Wow, huh? This is a little shrubby-like tree, doesn't get very big. It's all over the place, usually on roadsides, kind of a weedy little tree, really. But in China, the bark is popularly used for dysentery and other bowel complaints. An interesting passage from King's American Dispensary. This is actually what doctors and pharmacists were using in 1898. Says that the bark of Alliances has been used in the dried state as a remedy for dysentery and diarrhea, also gonorrhea, leukorrhea, and prolapse. Plants for a Future says it's also emetic, febrifuge, rubefacient, and vermifuge, meaning it kills the worms. Someone asked me recently, could I make a better effort to define some of these terms? So I am going to try my best to remember. If I say rubefacient, it reddens the skin, makes it warm. If it's vermifuge, it kills worms. Emetic means it helps you throw up if you need to, like if you have eaten something bad, poison or whatever. Febrifuge means it breaks a fever. Diuretic means it helps you get rid of excess fluids. Another interesting fact about the Allianthus, Tree of Heaven, it's been used to treat malaria. And I'm not going to say it works or not, but this is another one people have been looking at for COVID. So think about that next time you see that scruffy little tree and think that it's a weed. Yeah, it may be considered invasive by some, but this is a really important herbal that we've got growing just wild all over the place. But here's one that'd be a little more common to everybody. Okay, so wherever you live in the northern hemisphere, unless you're, in a desert somewhere, and we don't really have any of those in the southeast, we have birch trees. Birch is one of the most useful trees that most people never even pay any attention to. Yeah, it's a pretty tree. It's a tree that either has a silvery bark or a papery bark. Did you know you can tap it like a maple and get syrup? Birch syrup was actually used to make beer in early America, in colonial America, and was probably the most popular beverage of all. The twigs are actually the flavor of wintergreen. So it's very refreshing on a hot summer day to have a birch beer. And I include a really good birch beer recipe in here. But first of all, the medicinal uses of it. The oil's astringent. It can be used for skin infections, some internal maladies, according to Miss Greaves. A decoction of the bark is good for skin eruptions, inflamed, swollen tissue. The sap is diuretic, again, takes off excess fluid from the body. The inner bark is bitter and astringent and can be used in intermittent fevers. Here's an interesting source I found. There's an old book called An Irish Herbal that was published in the 1700s. They said the liquid that is drained off this tree in the springtime is good for dispelling urinary disorders like stones, pains, and bleeding. A decoction of the leaves, when drunk, is considered good for scurvy. Brother Aloysius was an herbalist who was sort of a protege of Father Nate, and his stuff is kind of hard to find. He said the bark is bitter and astringent, the leaves are hot, desiccative, solvent, and stimulant to the appetite. It is recommended for dropsy. Father Künzle said it was good for rheumatism. Dr. Thompson of the Thomsonian system of medicine said a tea made of this bark is useful for curing all complaints of the bowels and to remove obstructions. It is also of use in dysentery. This tea, this tea with peach meats or cherry stone meats, it means peaches or cherries, made into a syrup is an excellent article to restore patients after having been reduced by that disease and to promote digestion. It is good for canker and all complaints of the bowels. The leaves can be used as medicine and they are more diuretic and are very soothing to the entire urinary apparatus in cases of renal and cystic irritation or inflammation. King's American Dispensary said it was stimulant, gently stimulant, diaphoretic, and astringent. Used in a warm infusion, good for diarrhea, dysentery, cholera. Let's see, I've got some Native American uses here. Skin wash for rashes. Plants for a Future says it's anti-inflammatory, cholagogue, diaphoretic. I'm just telling you, there is going to be more information on any tree you see in this book than you're going to find anywhere else. I've got more and more quotes here. Well, yeah, we can get into the birch beer. I've got let's see, Yule Gibbons. I got this one from Yule Gibbons. It's a classic birch beer recipe. And he said of this that this birch beer that has a reputation for stimulating the appetite, but more than a glass or two at a time is likely to stimulate other things, for this beer has kicked like a mule. So you got that to look forward to if you want to try it out. Herod Buhner's book, Sacred and Healing Herbal Beers, talks about birch sap and making the birch beer. But he also talks about the wintergreen flavor, essentially, that's in birch. It's the flavor we associate with wintergreen. That's methyl salicylate. That is like the willow, similar to aspirin. So you can use birch beer for arthritis and rheumatic conditions, reducing a fever, muscle aches and pains. I've just got so much here. And, just a taste of, say, what the physician's desk reference would say of common birch. Again, we're not talking about anything exotic. The leaves are useful for flushing out therapy for bacterial and inflammatory diseases of the urinary tract and for kidney gravel. They are also used in adjunct therapy for rheumatoid arthritis, for increasing amount of urine. In folk medicine, the leaves are used as a blood purifier and good for gout and rheumatism. Externally, the leaves are used for hair loss and dandruff. No health hazards or side effects are known in conjunction with proper administration or designated therapeutic dosages. So, hey, that's more than anybody has probably ever told you about birch, isn't it? And that is just scratching the surface. I think you're just really going to enjoy this book, and I think it's going to be a valuable reference. Like I said, when you get sick, if you have diarrhea, if you have a cut, if you have swelling, a sprain, you don't want to be out there foraging around if you've got the tree that you need right there in your backyard or in a city park or anywhere that you can just get to it easily. And for some reason, like I said, a lot of herbalists just don't focus on the trees. So that was my goal in writing this book, and I honestly think I've done a pretty good job with it. Going to sell for around $10, and I think it's going to be one of the best bargains possible because honestly, it's a book that could save your life. But standard disclaimer: listen to the end of the show. I'm not making any claims about what any herb can do in any way, shape, or form. So with that said, y'all, I'm going to wrap this one up. I wanted to make one more announcement, and that is that this week, or actually last week, I started an eBay store to sell some of the herbs that I either grow or forage. Right now, I just have on there mullein and mimosa. But the thing is, I've got a lot of mimosa. I wanted to be able to provide mimosa to people where mimosa doesn't grow. I think it is such an important herb. It is so good for allergies. I did a whole video on this last week, last Tuesday. You can watch my video lesson. But we've discussed this several times. Mimosa reduces mast cells. Mast cells are the histamine receptors. So taking a tincture of mimosa every day is just really good for allergies. It's also a muscle relaxer. It reduces pain, and it's a sedative. It can help you sleep. In fact, that's the primary use for it. If you look on Plants for Future, naturalmedicinalherbs.net, talk all about it. It's sedative, narcotic, relaxing, sleep-inducing effect. It's also just really nice. The blossoms smell sort of like watermelon, and the tincture that you make tastes sweet and pleasant, and you can actually just add a little to a drink or take it by itself. It's one I look forward to. And I had a chance to trim a bunch of trees at an old cemetery and came back with a pickup truck load of it. So I have carefully dried all this out and processed it, and I am now selling it on my eBay store. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to my eBay store. But keep checking on that because as I wild harvest herbs throughout the year, I'm going to get a few extra ounces and sell them. When you buy them from me, you know it's coming from an ethically harvested source. If I grow them myself, I'm using a permaculture, polyculture system, no chemicals. This is what we call better than organic. I can't call it organic because that's a legal term. We say better than organic because in permaculture, we don't use any chemicals at all. No fertilizers, no pesticides, no herbicides. We don't use a lot of artificial watering. We literally grow plants together in a deep mulch with natural rainwater as much as possible so that they're like they are in nature, but better. I mean, it's like you found them in an ideal site for foraging in nature. So throughout the year, I'll be adding things that I am wildcrafting or things that I'm growing, and you're buying directly from me. So if that means anything to you, if my reputation is good enough, I would encourage you to go to the store and see if there's something on there you want. But the herbs are the highest quality I can get. That's what I want to provide to you. I don't think you're going to find a higher quality anywhere. And it's a lot of the unique stuff that I'm going to offer that probably a lot of other people won't. And then, things that are more common, like mullein. I wanted to go ahead and get some mullein out there because a tincture of mullein and mimosa, the two combined, really, really good for respiratory lung allergies. For me, anyway, that's all I can say. Of course, I can't more than that, but you understand. All right, y'all, have a great week. I hope I know you're going to love this book. I'm serious. I hope you'll buy it. And as I always say, if you can't, I understand. It's hard times for everybody, but if you can, I sure appreciate it. So, y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.